Everyone, and welcome to Using the AEC Collection Tools for Land Development Projects. This is part 1 of a part 2 series. Today's presenter is Jeff Morris, who is our Learning Content Developer for ASCENT. So with that, Jeff, I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Welcome, everyone, to this session. And this is a little bit different than our regular ASCENT sessions, which focus on existing books and existing courseware and tips and tricks within it. This, however, is forward-looking. It is a presentation I made to Autodesk University last year, and it's using the various tools within the AEC collections for a fictional land development project. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of testing the waters with this to see how this could develop into a new course for us that we're going to be developing at ASCENT. So I tested the waters at AU, and I would also like to hear your feedback on what you think. All the feedback information will be listed at the end of the presentation. So we'll be going over quite a lot of information here. At Autodesk University, this presentation was a little bit over an hour, and it was like drinking from a fire hose. A lot of information was displayed, and that's typical of AU. So we thought we would slow things down a little bit and break this into 2 sessions. This is the first one, and the next one will be held in February. So we'll be looking at a fictional land development project at a 30,000-foot view, or for the non-Americans on this call, that would be 10 kilometers. So we won't be delving into too much detail with this. This is me, Jeff Morris, and I started way back with AutoCAD 2.52, which was a short-lived release, which soon got replaced by version 2.6. If anyone on the call remembers the dongles and the protection that 2.52 issued, they can recall why that was such a short-lived release. And after that, they switched to release numbers rather than versions, and after 2.6 came release 9, which also coincided with the advent of the DCA engineering software. And the DCA engineering software morphed into ADCAD, which became Sofdesk Civil. That became Autodesk Land Development Desktop, which became Land Desktop, also known as ADT. And the rest is history, leading us to the here and now. So my career has been divided between the buildings and the infrastructure sectors, between working as a consultant and a trainer with Autodesk resellers, both in Canada and the US, and as a CAD and BIM manager in both public and private sectors. From a 5-person civil survey firm to a prestigious architectural interior firm in Philadelphia, to the large federal public works department in Canada, to one of the largest AE firms in the Middle East. So I've been around the block. And now I'm working with ASCENT, the Center for Technical Knowledge, developing learning content for our infrastructure, BIM 360, and Navisworks courses, and we also develop custom content. So therefore, with such a background in the BIM and CAD management, my focus, my passion, really is to deliver all these interesting tools that we have within the AEC collections in such a way to make your end product easier, smarter, and more efficient to come by, whatever your end product may be. It could be construction drawings, perhaps 3D models, analytical models, or perhaps land XML file for grading machines, perhaps stakeouts, or conceptual masses, as-built drawings, etc. As we said, this is the first of a 2-part series, and today we'll be sampling both the Sketchbook and Format programs to develop some sketches and conceptual ideas, and then use InfraWorks for examining those concepts and do some preliminary layouts and grading. And for part 2, which is next month, we'll be bringing that InfraWorks model into Civil 3D for some further study and design development. And once we have the grading around the buildings established, that can be shared with Revit. And finally, next month, we'll be examining both the Civil 3D and Revit models in Navisworks for some quantification and visualization. During my regular training, at some point in the class, the question may arise as to which is the best tool to use. And my standard answer always is, well, it depends on what you want to do. We all know that mText is a fabulous tool in AutoCAD, but don't dismiss the dtext, dynamic text, for single line text that can be individually placed and manipulated for each line. We have also multi-leaders that contain text along with some leaders. And then we have fields, we have attributes, and we even have dimensions, all of which produce text type annotation. And again, during some of our training, the AutoCAD Essentials training, people would often coo over the advantages of a polyline. But as we mature more in AutoCAD, we realize that the line has its own merits. For example, it has bearings. We can do splines, and even multi-leaders can do line work. Or, for those of us that were 40 in the audience, you may remember the multi-lines, or even the solid command, or going way back, there was that ancient trace command. So as we mature in AutoCAD, we learn the merits of each of these commands, and it becomes clear that one tool is not better than another. They each have their own advantages, and it all depends on what you want to achieve as to which tool is the best tool. So when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when you're a screwdriver, well, you could be screwed. So rather than finding one tool to do everything for us, let's explore all the tools within our toolbox, the AEC collection, and learn how to use each tool effectively for its own merit. So I started with Sketchbook, and Sketchbook used to be part of the AEC collections. Now it is an individual free download from the Autodesk website. Sketchbook Pro is available in the media and entertainment collections, but I just use the regular Sketchbook. It's got a nice intuitive interface like drafting board tools. For example, we can use a variety of French curves. We have ellipses. We can draw straight edges. We've got a variety of editing tools like mirroring, moving, copying. And we can trace over any image format. So what I did is I did a screen grab from Google Earth for the area that we want to work on, and I started sketching it up. Now this works great on a pad. I don't have a pad or a tablet. I just have a laptop, so my sketches are a little bit crude. But still, it was enough to designate where our stormwater should be. We have some proposed layouts for the roads. There might be a noise hazard that we need to be aware of from the highway north of our site. And we have some solar gain, potential solar gain from the south. So once I have these sketches, I can save them into BIM 360 via the Autodesk Desktop Connector and bring them into my BIM 360 project. And the nice thing about BIM 360 is that we can have different versions. So I could select which version I want to bring it in for further study. Moving on to Format. Format is a free download as well from the Autodesk website. And it's a great tool for conceptual massing, somewhat similar to Sketchup. And we can incorporate aerial photography from Bing Maps, which is nice because it's the same format that we can bring into Civil 3D or InfraWorks. These models can be exported via an FBX format, which is the Autodesk Filmbox format. And then they can be imported into tools like 3D Studio Max or InfraWorks. Civil 3D no longer allows us to import FBX files. And then we have the Format Pro program, which is part of the AEC Collections. And what we can do with the Format Pro is we can do some energy analysis, which uses the Green Building Studios, which is nice because that is the same engine that Revit uses. So when we do a more detailed energy analysis in Revit, we're using the same data sources, the same engine. With the Format Pro, we can also share some charrettes, which means online viewers can actually follow my camera as it goes around Format Pro for online collaboration. So I could georeference my format model via the Google Bing Maps files, but I chose not to do that. I choose to use my great sketch that I generated in Sketchbook for my Format Pro office model, office mapping. And then when I was done, I saved this directly into BIM 360 docs. It has its own specialized folder. I didn't need to go through the Autodesk Desktop connector like I did with Sketchbook. Moving on to InfraWorks, once I had my Sketchbook sketch ready and I did some some massing for the office building, I can now bring them into InfraWorks for some more analysis and some preliminary grading. InfraWorks allows us to build a model from Model Builder, and that brings in existing conditions from aerial images from Bing Maps, and also topology from, I believe it's an open source, this is an American site, so this was from the USGS open sources. We can also bring in roadways and waterways. And if I had GIS information, I could connect to that via the ARC desktop connector directly into InfraWorks, which is also available in Civil 3D. However, I don't have any login information for the ArcGIS connector, so I couldn't really utilize those. So I just used the GIS information that was readily available through the Model Builder. From that, we start developing our conceptual ideas via the sketches that we did in Sketchbook. We have some existing 2D CAD drawings that we will bring in, and that just shows some preliminary layout ideas done with regular AutoCAD line work. We will bring in the massing from Format via FBX that I explained earlier, and we'll also be bringing in the Revit models, and from that we'll be doing some preliminary grading. And then finally we'll be doing some analysis directly with InfraWorks. We're going to be looking at the topology in terms of some solar gain. We'll be doing some slope analysis. We'll be analyzing the shadows that our proposed buildings will cast on neighboring buildings. And we'll be also looking at some vantage points as to what we can see from various points within our model. Now, this is a pre-recorded video because with AU, I was just too nervous that the InfraWorks or Civil 3D would crash. So therefore, I went through the time to pre-record this video, although I will be speaking over it. So this is the InfraWorks model that I generated with Model Builder, and everything that you see here got generated from Model Builder. We have the Bing Maps, which is the same one that we could have brought into Format, and it is also the same source that Civil 3D uses for its online maps. The roads came from open source OpenStreets, and the topology came from the USGS data site. So what I'm going to be doing first is I'm going to be importing that sketch that I had. I'm going to find my raster, and this goes to the Autodesk Desktop connector, and I'm going to pick that sketch that I generated earlier with Sketchbook. I'm going to interactively place it as best as I can, and I can right-click on it and place by reference points that allows me to pick up to 3 points so that point on the drawing, on my image, and where it belongs on the model. I'll do it in the lower point, and then we'll place it correctly. Now I'm going to be bringing in the CAD drawings there on my local drive. They were already generated for my proposed engineering. This needs to be sent up to the cloud for processing to convert the CAD drawing, excuse me a minute, sorry about that, which converts the CAD drawing into a format that I can bring into InfraWorks. Now this CAD drawing was done, was already georeferenced, so in the same unit, so it comes in properly. Or I could place it as I did earlier via my reference points. And now I'm going to be bringing in the massing, the Office FBX file. This I have to manually place because it's not georeferenced. And in the meantime, I jumped forward here a little bit, and I also brought in the Revit models. You notice we have the school up in the top right corner. I'm sorry, that's the hotel in the top right corner, and the school in the lower portion. These are Revit models that I incorporated as well. They, again, had to be manually placed, but the scale was, they would come in at the proper scale. Now what I'm going to do is I want to lock the two overlays that I have. So the sketch and the CAD drawings, I'm going to lock them in my Model Explorer so I can't accidentally move them and manipulate them. Okay, so this is the terrain that we have to work with, and you can see that it's quite a difficult terrain. We can do some analysis on this. I'm going to return to my home screen. And I want to see the contours. So I switch my view to my engineering view that displays my contours. And let's start doing an analysis on this in terms of my slopes. I have already predefined the slopes that I want, ranging from 5% up to 30%, and giving them specific colors. And then InfraWorks does an analysis based on my slope terrain, and it is draped over my terrain, and I can visualize where the steep slopes might be within my site to prevent that. I can also do a direction, which shows me the southern exposures. And you notice that that is translucent, so I can actually see the aerial photography over my analysis. I can turn that off and return to my home screen. What I want to do now is I want to save this as a proposal A, so I can always come back to my existing conditions for another proposal. I don't need that sketch anymore, so I'm going to turn off that sketch. And now I return to my home position. And now I'm going to do some preliminary grading. I'm using the land areas. I picked my style. Land areas are still in preview mode for InfraWorks, so they've been in there for a while. I really like them, but just use caution when you use them because they're still only in preview mode. They haven't made it up to the big leagues yet, so to speak. I'm producing 3 land areas based on where my proposed roads are going to be going through. And every point that I pick becomes a vertex within the land area that I can then manipulate later on for some proposed grading. So I have my 3 land areas here, and I'm going to go to a predefined bookmark for my corner where I can start analyzing these land areas. What I like about land areas is that I can give it some rule grading based on a 2-to-1 slope or a 3-to-1 slope for my cut and fills, or I can have different slopes for cut and fills as well. So I'm picking a 2-to-1 slope here, and now you can see the vertices that we generated with every point that I picked. And I can take each vertex and change the elevation by either dragging it up or down, or by typing in the elevation that I want. I can also right-click and add a vertex, and again, that vertex I can drag up or down, or I could simply drag that to a different position. And this gives me visual feedback as how my grading is going to occur. Now for the upper land area, again, I'm going to apply some rule grading to that. I'm going to pick the same one at a 2-to-1 slope. And now I can move the entire land area with the blue arrow up or down as a whole. And of course, I can control my individual vertices like I did earlier. Okay, I jumped ahead a little bit here. Let me explain what I did. I did some preliminary, no, I didn't do that. Sorry about this. So I jumped ahead a little bit because I did some more grading behind on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side. And now I'm going to be doing some preliminary cut-fill terrain statistic analysis. It gives me the cut and the fill for this particular area. It doesn't produce a report, so I would actually have to manually write this down to get an idea of what my cut-fill calculations are for this. Now this is where I jumped ahead. Okay, in the meantime, what happened here is I did put a pond up in the upper area. I did this with InfraWorks as well. In the upper area around my office building and my hotel, I did some preliminary coverage areas. And now what I'm going to be doing is for the school, I'm going to produce coverage area. Coverage areas, I'm going to give it a style. They are similar to land areas, but I can't do individual cut and fill slopes for my preliminary grading. However, as you'll see shortly, I do like it for grading up to the building footprint. I select the vertices again like I did with my land area. And by default, what this does is it drapes my coverage area over my existing terrain. Now this is already reasonably flat, but if this were sloped, I can then right-click on it, and I can tell it to shape the terrain And what shaping the terrain does will flatten the whole coverage area out, and then I can move the coverage area up and down, which makes it ideal for grading to the building footprint. So I typically use a combination of land areas and coverage areas for my preliminary grading. Like I did with my land areas, I can have my individual vertices that I can then move up and down as well to do some more refined grading. Return to my home position. I no longer need the contours, so I'm going to switch it back to my conceptual views to turn off my contours. And I'm going to do another terrain statistics here by going around the entire area. And now I have more refined cut fill calculations for this. Again, I jumped ahead a little bit here. And what I've done in the meantime is I've adjusted my pond a little bit. In the northwest corner, I added some vegetation. I put in what I call monopoly houses, which are readily available from InfraWorks predefined houses with various styles. I put some the roads in going across my site, along with ASCENT place, moving up to my offices and my hotel. I developed some irregular footprints for buildings over on the eastern side and applied a variety of styles for those buildings. And in the center of in the site with the yellow coverage area, this is a commercial site that I may want to develop further. And I pre-populated that with a small church and some people up in the top corner of this. So as we proceed on, this is the commercial site. And these are the buildings that I generated with my building footprints. But I can't manipulate them because they are, if you may recall early on in this presentation, I actually locked those layers. So I go to my Model Explorer and unlock my building layers. And now when I click on a building, I can actually adjust the heights, or I can adjust the entire building footprint as I need to. And you see that the individual styles are assigned to these buildings as I adjust the height and more floors occur. I'm going to go back and lock my buildings so I don't accidentally move them. We have these city furniture objects within InfraWorks, which is very, very extensive. So I'm going to start searching for a gas station. I have 2 gas stations that I can pick from. And I select my gas station and I double click and it plops it into place. Then I can move it and rotate it. And if I need to, I could actually scale it, but most of the city furniture is already drawn to the proper scale. So here I have my my gas station, and then behind I have the people that were already there for context for scale. There's actually a little hot dog stand there as well. Now another type of city furniture that we have is rather than placing one individual item, is I can place a variety of items. I'm going to go back to my city furniture and type in turbine to search for turbines. And we see the turbine that's available. It has a small little arrow next to it, which means it's an animated turbine. So I select that, and rather than double clicking to place my turbine, I'm going to single click, and I place I'm generating a line, and it's going to place as many turbines as it can based along this linear feature. As you see, that kind of was over optimistic, but I can still go in and I can adjust the density by moving that density slider up and down as to how many turbines will go into my site. Okay, so let's have a look at how these turbines will affect the overall site. And I have some bookmarks here to see what I'm going to see from my school. I do see the big office building there and the turbines in the background. From my hotel entrance, the turbines aren't visible. Okay, let's look at some some sun studies now. So we have this big office building here, and I can select the date that I want to study my shadows for, and then I can move this time slider back and forth, and we can see how the shadows move across the site on that particular date. Or vice versa, I can select a particular time of day, and then I can move my date back and forth to see how the shadows are going to affect it. Now for presentation purposes, if I want to start presenting this to the other team members, there are two types of project team members. There are those that are part of my BIM 360 hub, and then there are a variety of stakeholders that are not part of BIM 360. Now this is a recurring theme. You may remember back in Format Pro that we could present our ideas to the non-team members, so other interested parties. I could share my charrettes with Format Pro. That is what the shared views are all about. What I'm doing here is I'm going to be generating a storyboard that I could either export as a video file to the non-BIM 360 users, or I can publish it up in BIM 360 for the BIM 360 team members to view. So this is a storyboard that I can generate, and the easiest way to generate a storyboard, which is I'm doing here, is I'm going to select it from a component road. We have our ASCENT place here. I simply select that, and I set my settings in terms of my horizontal and vertical offsets, and then it generates the storyboard for me immediately, and I can start driving along. So at any point during my replay, I can actually pause it, and when it's paused, I can then go back to my sun studies and do a much more detailed analysis from this particular vantage point for the sun and shadow studies. So as I check out and again, the office building doesn't affect this particular building. And then as I move around, at any point again, I can pause my playback, and then I can use any of my navigation tools within InfraWorks to examine the site. So I can zoom in, zoom out, I can pan around to examine the site. And when I'm done, I resume my playback, and it continues where it left off. So this is a great tool. I can publish this up in the BIM 360. This is a great tool for other team members to see. They can interact with the model just like I did. Or for these non-project members, I can generate what's called a shared view. So I'm going to go back to a predefined office site here, and I'm going to generate my shared view. I select the view that I want. I don't need to select the entire model. I can select the area of the model that I want to generate my shared view for. I can generate my shared view. It generates a link that I can then send to other interested parties that are not part of my BIM 360 view. And they can actually open this up in any web browser, and they can see what we're trying to do. Now, as you see, it's not perfect. It had a problem with that FBX file that we generated. The windmill, the wind turbines are not animated, but it still gives people a pretty good idea of what we're trying to achieve. Let's go on here. So this kind of wraps up the first part of this presentation, where we brought in, we did some preliminary sketches with Sketchbook. Hopefully you have a tablet, so you can do much better sketches than I did. Then we did the office building massing within Format. We could bring the Format model into Green Building Studios. That's through Format Pro. And we could also share our charrettes through Format Pro with other interested parties. Then we brought everything into InfraWorks, and with Model Builder, we generated the preliminary site that had the topology and the existing roads, existing waterways, and the aerial photography from Bing Maps. And then we used that to analyze the terrain with slopes and with directions. Then we brought in our sketches and started populating our concept. Next month, we will take this model that we have generated in InfraWorks, and we're going to import it into Civil 3D, where we're going to do a variety of very, very similar steps in terms of analysis and cut fill analysis and turning contours on and off. But everything in Civil 3D is to a much finer degree. And the analysis that we generate, we can actually quantify it and print those out. So with Amazon, with ASCENT, we have a variety of sources where we generate our, where we distribute our books from. We have printed books, we have electronic books, and we even have some e-learning bundles for a variety of our customers. For instructors, we have instruction guide versions of our books. Both printed and e-books are available. And we have digital site licenses for larger educational institutions. As I said earlier, we are planning on having, we are considering having this and next week's presentation as part of a course, developing a new type of course that incorporates multiple products. And we would like to hear your feedback on what you think of that proposal. And these are a variety of ways that you can get in touch with us. We have, of course, an email. We have a presence on Facebook and Twitter. We do have a YouTube account, and we're also present with LinkedIn.